Hello, everyone. For one of our professional development activities today, we're going to talk about people first language. This is something that is very near and dear to me, and I'm going to talk about what people first language is, why it's important to me, and why it is important for everyone. But first, I want to talk about this quote. Until we learn to appreciate the power of language and the importance of using it responsibly, we will continue to produce negative social consequences for those victimized by dangerous language habits. And a lot of this we do on accident. We don't think about what we're saying and the connotation that it has and how it has a negative social consequence or a negative effect on a person. And there are other things that we say that we do say on purpose because of that negative. We say it on purpose, so we know what it entails. So I want to just talk about people first language and what we're saying that we don't mean to be saying and how we can reword our language to make it inclusive and respectful for those with disabilities. So first, people first language. 1 in 5 people have a disability. That is the largest minority there is, and it's very diverse because it comes with people of all ages and genders and ethnicities. So we really need to be thoughtful of people with disabilities and how we are talking to people with disabilities. Sometimes people use words or phrases that are insensitive and don't promote understanding, dignity, and respect for people with disabilities, like I said earlier. People first language is used to communicate appropriately and respectfully with and about an individual with a disability. So now that we know what people first language is, that it's basically just a appropriate and kind and respectful way to talk to people with disabilities, let's look at some rules of thumb. So the person comes first. We're talking about the person. We're not talking about their disability. We talk about their person first. We're going to use appropriate clinical names. We're going to steer away from retarded or crazy or insane. We're going to find their clinical name. You're going to avoid the word suffers from. People with disabilities, they do not suffer. They still have abilities. So you want to avoid the word suffers from. Be aware of invisible disabilities. Basically, we should always be using people first language no matter who we're around. May have a disability, but they have many abilities. So when you meet a person or a person's around with disabilities, that's just one aspect about them. They have many abilities that we need to focus on as well. Do not use offensive language. That would be, retarded, insane, like I said earlier, any offensive language or language that implies negative stereotypes. And as teachers, we accidentally at times use language that implies these negative stereotypes, and I'll give you an example here in a bit. And do not portray people with disabilities as inspirational only because of their disability. This is something that a lot of people, including myself, struggle with. But if we are going to use people first language and we are going to treat the people with disabilities with respect, then we can't talk about them as if they're inspirational only because of their disability. They have to be inspirational beyond that to receive that kind of praise. And I'll give you an example on type of language to use for that scenario, for all of these scenarios actually. So there are tons and tons and tons of phrases and language use that people use incorrectly in terms of people first language. But here are the top 8 that I want us to work on as a building, because this is what I see the most and hear the most, and some of these I'm even guilty of myself. So she is autistic. That is not people first language. All of the ones on the left, that is not people first. So instead of she is autistic, she has autism, and that would work for Down syndrome or any other diagnosis, okay? They are not autistic, they have autism. Autism isn't who she is, it's what she has. He is confined to his wheelchair or wheelchair bound. he uses a wheelchair or a mobility chair. In the last slide, there was a little picture of a girl saying, I'm not wheelchair bound, I'm a wheelchair user who is free to move. She's in special ed or a sped kid. I hear this a lot. She is not a special ed kid. She receives special ed services. Normal or healthy kids, I am guilty of this as well. Normal kids, healthy kids, or anything in that similar language is very insensitive and creates stereotypes, because by saying normal kids, even if we don't mean it, that is saying that our children with disabilities are not normal kids, and that's not the stereotype or what we mean to say, so we shouldn't say it if that's not what we mean. What we mean by our normal or healthy kids is children without disabilities. You have your children with disabilities and your children without disabilities. Is nonverbal. This I hear as well. Communicates with her eyes, device, etc. At our school, we don't tend to have a lot of students who are nonverbal or communicate with their eyes or devices. We have students who used to communicate differently with devices. And it's hard too, because we hear parents that say nonverbal, but we need to change our language as well. So even if a parent uses a different language, you need to stay with this people first, because then they'll get used to it and it just kind of progresses. Has overcome his/her disability, is courageous. This is what I was talking about earlier. No praise or giving inspirational for them because of their disability. It is a person who is successful, productive because blank. They had to have done something other than just have their disability to deserve that praise. Handicapped parking or bathroom. It needs to be accessible parking or bathroom. I hear this a lot as well. I'm going to use the handicapped restroom. Somebody parked in the handicapped parking. That gives a negative stereotype, a negative connotation to the parking or the bathroom. It's just accessible. It's just more accessible for somebody who has a wheelchair or something like that. So we need to start saying accessible parking or bathroom. Epileptic, and this works for a lot of other similar disabilities. It's a person with epilepsy or seizure disorder. That kind of goes back to number one. Person with, person has. That's not who the person is. It's just part of them. This is a People First language pledge that I just thought was a cool idea. If you want to sign it and give it away to remind yourself that you're going to use People First language and think before you speak and realize how your words affect our students. Also, this is a great quick way to go through this kind of language with a class. So if you have a class that you need to revisit this with, or all of your classes, and you sign this little pledge, I think that would be a really great idea. That way, not only are we getting this training, but your students are as well, because there were phrases in here that I was saying without realizing were not People First language, and this is something that I tried very hard to be conscious of, and I was still learning things that I was saying is not People First language. Here are a list of my references, so if you want to go back and look and review any of these references to learn more, I highly encourage you to. They were great resources. If you ever have any questions, if you aren't sure if you're using People First language, if you don't know how to rephrase something or restructure something that you've been saying into People First language, please let me know. I'm happy to help. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and we'll start being more conscious of using People First language. Thank you and have a good day.